Almost see it, that dream I'm dreaming, but there's a voice inside my head saying you'll never reach it. Every step I'm taking.
Your brain is like a hard drive. The space is limited. This is what your brain does. It protects you from overloading with information. That's why all new data is stored in the short-term memory, not the long one. So if you don't repeat it or use it, you forget it very quickly. Getting curve, which shows that just 1 hour after learning something new, we forget more than half of the learned information. I'm sorry, what was that? Anyway, 1 day later, we remember only about 30%. Well, you can see where this is going. To keep some information in your head for a longer time, you need to try to put it into your long-term memory. If you've been in a situation where you had only one night to prepare for an exam, give this video a like. To memorize something quickly, repeat the information right after learning it. The second repetition should be after 15 to 20 minutes. You don't need to return to the information between repetitions. Just rest and do something different. Let your brain relax. Repeat the learned material the third time after 6 to 8 hours. And you should have the final repetition 24 hours after the first contact with the information. If you want to remember things for a long time, you need to extend the memorization period. Here's the memorization plan. The first repetition should be right after learning, just like in the previous technique. Repeat the material after 20 to 30 minutes. And here, things are different. The third repetition should be only after 1 day. The next one after 2 to 3 weeks. And the final round is after 2 to 3 months. This way, you can learn something for a very long time because the brain thinks that if you return to the information, it means that it's necessary, so it doesn't get erased. The feeling when you're learning something but you don't understand the information. Usually, such learning turns into a nightmare because it looks like learning a poem that has no rhyme. Another bad thing about learning something you don't understand is that if you forget some part of it, you will not be able to continue because you have only memorized the order of words, not their actual meaning. That's why we don't recommend doing it this way. What you should do is read the entire piece of information and figure out what the main point or points are. Try to retell what you have read using your own words. Do it as simply as you can. If you are successful, that means you understood the information, and now it will be way easier to memorize the details. Feel like you have too much on your plate? Set your priorities correctly. Decide what you have to know and what you can do without just fine. After that, focus on the key parts of what you need to memorize. If you find some time to devote to the less important information, great. When learning something new, remember this. Things that are at the beginning and the end are memorized the best. Use this effect to your advantage. Sort the information so that the key parts are at the beginning and at the end. The idea is to associate certain things with a certain place. For example, if you are in your room, try to connect the thing you are learning to something in your room. Repeat it a few times. After that, try to recall what the room looks like in your memory and repeat the things you learned this way. Or try this. Divide all the material you need to memorize into a few parts. Learn these parts in different parts of your apartment, or better, in different places in your city. This way, the memorized information won't be something dull or boring. It will be associated with some other memories, smells of places, people you saw there, and so on. If you need to memorize a lot of information in a particular order, try to put the pieces into a story. It's important that the pieces are connected to each other with some kind of plot. So, if you accidentally forget something, you can always recall what was supposed to happen next in the story. Record the information somehow you are learning and listen to the recording a few times. Yes, it might take you some time to get used to the sound of your voice, like I had to do. It might seem strange or unpleasant in the beginning. This method is handy because it allows all types of memory work. First, you read the information so you saw it with your eyes, and then you heard it with your ears. The more contact you have with what you are learning, the better you memorize it.
Research shows that study sessions are most effective in small, short chunks. Instead of cramming in a 10-hour study session, it's much more effective to spread it out into 20, 30-minute sessions over a few weeks. This is because your brain is better at encoding information into the synapses in short, repeated sessions as opposed to one large one. And this is why even learning different skills, whether it's swimming, tennis, or a singing lesson, often follows this same format. And while cramming and pulling all-nighters may be a ritual, it turns out that this is linked to the lowest grades. After prolonged nocturnal study sessions, reasoning and memory may be negatively affected for up to 4 whole days. Instead, setting up specific times in a day or during the week just to study primes your brain by creating a routine, and over time, studying actually becomes easier as your brain is trained to learn in those moments. And while many of us spend hours passively rereading our notes or highlighting a textbook, studies have shown this to be ineffective. It doesn't improve your understanding of topics, nor does it link key concepts together. It can even be detrimental as it draws your attention to less important information. Flashcards, on the other hand, are proven to be excellent memory reinforcement tools, whether during your scheduled study times or during off times like a bus ride home. It also helps to have a specific goal for each study session. Instead of aimlessly studying, pick one aspect you'll focus on, whether it's balancing chemical equations or learning how to conjugate French verbs. If you can't explain it simply, then you don't understand it well enough. In studies where individuals were asked to learn a passage, and then half were told that they would be tested on the material while the other half were told they would have to teach it to other students, participants expecting to teach it did much better at understanding the main points. When you're expecting to teach, your brain organizes the information in a more logical, coherent structure. Of course, practice, practice, practice. Not only do practice tests put your brain in the environment, but even if you make mistakes, they help identify gaps in your knowledge. Practice tests have also been shown to increase confidence, thereby leading to better performance.
The first strategy is called spaced practice. 5 hours of study crammed into one intensive session is not as good as that same 5 hours spread out over 2 weeks. You'll learn more and get better results with the same amount of time or less. It'll be less stressful than the panic of cramming, and because you'll learn more, you'll also reduce the time you need to study in the future, because you won't have to relearn the same information. Make a plan and schedule short study sessions into your calendar. This is not about marathon intensive periods of study. Review information from each class starting a day later. After you've covered the most recent class, go back and study important older information to keep it fresh. And don't just reread your notes, that's ineffective. Use the other strategies in this video. And leave 2 to 3 days between study sessions on the same subject. The key is consistent short study sessions over time. Switch between ideas during a single study session for a particular class. This is called interleaving. Don't study one idea, topic, or type of problem for too long. Switching will highlight and contrast the similarities or differences between topics or types of questions. If you're doing problem solving, switching can help you choose the correct approach to solve a problem. This strategy will encourage you to make links between ideas as you switch between them. You want your mind to be nimble and easily able to jump between ideas and know how they relate to each other. Make sure you study enough information to understand an idea before you switch. You'll need to figure out what works best for you. Don't spend an entire session on one topic, but don't switch too often either. Try to make links between ideas as you move between them. And for your next study session, change the order you work through topics, because that will strengthen your understanding even more. Switching will probably feel harder than studying one topic for a long time, but remember, we want to use what's most effective, not what's easiest. The next strategy is for when you have your textbook and notes in front of you. Ask yourself questions about how and why things work, and then find the answers in your class material. Explain and describe ideas with as many details as you can, and connect the ideas to your daily life and experiences. This forces you to understand and explain what you're learning and connect it with what you already know. That helps you organize the new ideas and makes them easier to recall later. Creating how and why questions makes you think about how ideas are similar or different, and that improves your understanding. Start with your notes and textbook and make a list of the ideas you need to learn. Go down the list and ask yourself questions about how these ideas work and why. Then go through your class material again and look for answers to your own questions. Make connections between different ideas and explain to yourself how they work together. The specific questions you ask and how you break down ideas depends on what you're studying. It might be math, science, history, or something else completely. Combine verbal material with visuals. Doing this gives you two ways of understanding and remembering the information later on. Find visuals in your notes and textbook and examine how the words are describing what's in the image. Then do it the other way around. How does the image represent what's described by the text? Look at the visuals and explain in your own words what they mean. Then take the words from your class materials and draw your own picture for them. Try to create different ways to represent the information, and start to use this strategy when you practice retrieving your knowledge later on. And just to clarify, this is not about learning styles. A great deal of research has shown that assessing your learning style and matching your study approach to that style does not improve your learning. Just because you might prefer pictures doesn't mean it's the most effective way for you to learn. You learn best when you combine words and visuals. And finally, this is the single most valuable study skill to help you boost your performance, so it's definitely worth mastering. Practice retrieving everything in your head you already know about a topic. Put away all your notes and textbooks and write down or sketch out everything you know right now. Why? Because retrieving your knowledge like this reinforces what you've learned and makes it easier to remember later on. But also, improvement comes with practice. If you want to get better at recalling information in exams, then you should practice recalling information now, just like you practice any other skill. Plus, it highlights what you don't know, and that's where you should focus your study time. Makes sense, right? So what's the best way to do this? Take as many practice tests as you possibly can, even if you have to make them up and swap with a friend. Or just start with a blank piece of paper and empty your brain. Write out everything you know, draw sketches or concept maps linking all the ideas together. Make sure you do this a while after you've learned something, so put away your notes. This is not about reciting information you've just glanced at in your textbook. Once you're finished, check what you've written against your class material. What did you get right or wrong, and what didn't you recall at all? That's perfect feedback and shows you where you need to get better.
The internet, which is...
It's an incredibly information-rich environment that the net creates for us, and that's why we use it so much. I mean, sounds, pictures, words, text. And what this tends to do is promote a sort of compulsive behavior in which we're constantly checking our smartphone, constantly glancing at our email inbox. We're kind of living in this perpetual state of distraction and interruption.
Which is dangerous because...
that mode of thinking crowds out the more contemplative, calmer modes of thinking.
And that focused, calm thinking is actually how we learn. It's a process called memory consolidation.
And that means the transfer of information from our short-term working memory to our long-term memory. And it's through moving information from your working memory to your long-term memory that you create connections between that information and everything else you know.
So you've got this awesome life-changing piece of information in your short-term memory, but then you hear that email ding and poof, there it goes. That email takes its place and you never get a chance to learn anything, all because of one distraction.
So attention is the key, and if we lose control of our attention or are constantly dividing our attention, then we don't really enjoy that consolidation problem.
About how fast I get